Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Centric. This being a show I talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the season finale of You. Great season finale. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So we are picking up in the aftermath of the last episode. Marion is dead. So she left a note saying, like, right, let my body be found, because at least this way, her daughter won't ever be constantly asking, like, oh, is my mom alive? Is my mom alive? Is my mom alive? And she out there? Did she abandon me? Now it's like, okay, at least you know your mom's gone and you won't be searching for her. So he's hoping to at very least give her some sort of peace with that. So he puts her body out in public. I guess the biggest thing I should have realized too is, why was that Marion's body was never like publicly like announced, like, oh, we found this body here? I guess that should have been the biggest thing. But to be fair, the whole thing about Reese's body surfacing kind of took over the news waves and stuff like that, and Joe became more focused on that. So, but I think it's also like, well, Marion was found without any identifications on her, so it was most likely she'd most likely be labeled as a Jane Doe. So, but you'd at least think you'd find something like that in the news. But I think Joe was just so caught up in everything that he didn't look any deeper than he should. Like, he should have looked deeper, but he didn't. So, but we'll circle back to all that in a little bit. But Joe, now that he's failed Marion, he's kind of got nothing to live for anymore, and obviously he's back to kind of feeling a certain way until like Kate is in trouble and it's an emergency. Obviously she tells him about her dad. It's like, my dad controlled everything in my life. It's like, she's like, my boyfriends, he would kind of push them away, like made it so like everything my entire life has been under my father's thumb. When I thought I left and cut him off and built so much on my own, it's like, no, I am his and I always will be, and there's no escaping it. The monster he made me into, the monster I became for his sake. It's just so much pain and trauma is associated with her dad. She's even wondering, like, is Jonathan real? And he's like, I'm real. I'm here. You're real. Like, this is me. This is you. You're okay. And obviously, well, Tom deserves to die. And even Joe's like talking to Reese, and Reese is like, I know you're not going to agree, but he's like, no, I agree. He's like, whoa, wait, no. He's like, yes. Okay, Tom deserves to die. Doesn't mean I have to enjoy it, have to get off on it. But yes, he's a terrible person, and we would be doing Kate a service. So it's like, right, how do we go about handling this? So basically drew him out into a trap. And it's like, oh, we could get very, like, stealthy about it and stuff like that. That'd be the approach. Obviously, things don't kind of go the way Joe wants them to. I mean, granted, he in the end ends up, it is this interesting, like, I like how it's displayed. Once again, it gives me very Dexter vibes, especially because, Dexter, not just only with his dark passenger, but obviously in the original series, he would see his dad, and then, spoilers, but not really, in New Blood, he sees his sister Deborah. So it's almost that kind of same thing with Reese sticking around, and obviously like them being kind of like a team when it comes to this whole situation, which I think is so jacked up and dope. But ended up catching Tom off guard because Tom was basically, I'm trying to remember I think it might have been before or after, but either way, he tried to paint Kate in a negative light, which I think there's some validity, well, not some validity, but made you go like, could be, because, I don't know, because the argument could be made. I don't think it is a valid argument, but it's that same thing that what she did with Adam, about bringing up Adam in front of her dad. She kind of brings up her dad in front of Joe, so it's kind of like, you probably could debate it. I don't think she intentionally did that. I mean, it's like, obviously this is someone you are falling in love with, that you are confiding in about something so complicated and messed up that's really got you all turned around and messed up, But yeah, he tried to convince him that, like, hey, like, Kate, you think she really loves you? You're just kind of a means to an end. Like, she's the one that drove all her boyfriends away. Like, this world is messed up. Neither you nor me, Joe, made this world the way it is. But, we make do in it. We survive. It's like, are you really going to kill me for being a survivor? All I've ever done is protect my daughter. I made the world better for my daughter. I've done so much for her. And it's like, fine, you want me to leave her alone? Fine, I'll leave her alone. But you do realize by killing me, you're just feeling that same void too, that like what I'm doing, you're basically feeling that. And I think there's an interesting parallel you can make with how Joe approaches his situation with women, and even as he said, like with like the love situation of like, right, I recognize who I am, and so he's come to terms with it and he's embraced it. It doesn't mean I have to necessarily like it, but it is a part of who I am. And even Reese is like, okay, so we should come together and not be the separate entities we are anymore. But yeah, like the fact is, I think you could make the argument. I mean, maybe it's the narcissism of it all, but maybe on some level, in his own twisted way, Tom did love Kate and his obsessiveness with his daughter, because he made a point. It's like, as Kate made the point last episode, you literally have 7 children. Why am I the one you focus on? Because it's like, you're everything. So she's his obsession. So there are like direct parallels you can make with how Joe handles, like when it comes to love, and how Tom handles when it comes to love. And I think Joe was also coming from his perspective on, I know why you think what you're doing is right when it comes to Kate, but it's not. You're hurting her, which he's like, yeah, I should know. I've hurt all the women in my life, and I've also doing all this because at the end, I want to like off myself because I don't want to end up hurting Kate, because I ultimately will, because that's a part of who I am. Time has shown I've repeated this over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. It's a part of who I am that I can never fully escape. I love that the security guy or whatever came, and Joe like went for like the Achilles and then went for his carotid artery in like his neck. And the fact this is Reese is like, oh, go for the carotid. And it's like, oh, you did it. It's like, I mean, it's like you are a proficient killer, but you, once again, he had to justify it in his head so many times that I guess he didn't fully embrace the monster that he is. And now he's fully embracing it. It's like, well, it is what it is. He ends up killing Tom, and it's like, right, it was supposed to be made look like a suicide situation, but it's like, nah, when in fact, we're going to make this seem like a murder thing of like his right-hand guy had money issues, stole some money, went too far, ended up killing Tom, and then just made the guy disappear. And even Joe was like, yeah, this might be the last body I ever have to make disappear. You know, and it's like, and even Reese telling us like, don't worry about it. This was a good kill. As in like, I think it could be interpreted as like I'm interpreting it as like no, like this was right. Like, this is like a good kill. Like, the fact of the matter is, her dad was a terrible, terrible human being, and in the long run, you're protecting Kate, so it all works out. It's a win-win-win type of thing for everyone all around. But when the time came, Joe was ready to kill himself, because for him it's like, that's the only way this can all end. It has to end. He can't keep living with this. But Reese is like, no, come on, like we have to do this. Like, why after all this? Like, Kate's safe and everything, but he's like, Kate will never be safe. Love what's right. This will never end as long as I'm alive. And Reese actually kind of breaks it down even more on a psychological level of like, why can't you ever love me? You recognize and accept that, yes, I'm a part of you, but you refuse to love me, to love this side of you. He's like, I've done so much for you. I've always been there for you. He's like, yes, you've been there before, you know, kind of, you're my cohort and all of this, but that's the problem. It always ends. Everything I do for love always ends up with a body in my trunk, and I'm tired of that history repeating over and over again. But that's what it also comes down to. It comes down to self-love, because he's like, Reese is like, you hate yourself so much that the fact of the matter is you can't ever, like, you are the human condition personified, because there's always that part of the human brain like drowning you in shame about who you are and what you do. And that's what you're doing right now. You're feeling all this shame about what you are, like. But for him, it's like, I get it, and I appreciate all that you've done for me. He's like, I get it. Like, it's not like it's just on you. This is me. You're just a personification of the dark side of myself I've pushed away for so long. But yes, you are me. But this has to end. So he tosses Reese over the edge and then jumps in. And it's like, yes, he has his natural instinct of he wants to get back. He wants to get back to Kate. But at the end of the day, he's like, it's too late in that moment where it's like, right, maybe if I tried harder, maybe if I was, this isn't me doing the selfless thing. In his mind, it's like, this is me giving up. Maybe I could have tried harder. Granted, yes, a lot of that messaging, anyone in that situation, specifically the unaliving yourself situation, yes, no one should be so quick and I get it, like the world feels like it's stacked against you, but it's like, once again, it is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. And even if it is a longer problem, like the fact of the matter is you never know what tomorrow brings type of situation. So like, yes, Joe being a piece of shit killer and all that, let's ignore that for like the message of what it can mean for someone. I mean, I think you can still pull nuggets out of that without the whole like, well, like Joe's unaliving himself is a different thing when he's a monster who's killed a whole bunch of people. Let's not forget, he hasn't just killed people, he's also ruined other people's lives in the process. At the same time, that's all going down. I would have thought, that Nadia would have gotten back to the Marianne situation, but I guess it's like, right, she probably saw Joe there maybe, and well, we get answers to it later on, because the fact that she didn't immediately go to Marianne made me think that was weird. But it's like, I was like, oh, maybe she found out. Once again, I just kept thinking, oh, I haven't said anything about it in the news or whatever, and Joe hasn't found it. That's why I was like so confused. But later on, we got the answer to it. But obviously, she brings Edward into it and kind of explains everything, and then shows him like, oh, this is where like he was holding someone. Because she first showed him like, okay, this is actually Jonathan Moore. His name is actually Joe. This is his wife, Love. And like, and and let me tell you everything he's done. They go trying to find the cage, but they can't. It's already gone. Now it looks like it was never there. Why not go to the police? It's like, well, he'll just find out and he'll run. He'll get away with everything. So they needed to make sure he pays. So they were trying to gather up everything they could. And then we get the truth from Nadia that the crazy plan B was that if Nadia didn't get back in time or whatever, that Marianne would end up like taking a whole bunch of beta blockers to make it seem like she was dead, because it'd make her heart go really, really slow. Because to be fair, she tried that before with Joe, pretending like pretending like she was drugged. This time it worked out, whereas before it didn't. I mean, because you also have to like obviously Well, because his usual tactic is, well, he'll bury a body, but this time she had to do was leave a note, because she knows that Joe is so in love with her and quote unquote cares about her, that he would do what her final wish is. So he wouldn't go through the trouble of dismembering the body just to hide it. He'd do this for her, like in his mind, trying to do the right thing by her daughter by being like, hey, your mom isn't coming back type of situation, making it a public thing. So luckily, Nadia followed them and was able to revive Marianne, and she was able to get away. Joe still doesn't know, because I think once again he's got so caught up in everything going on, he never like focused on that small detail of like, I never actually looked into it whether or not Marianne's body was found. I never really went into that. So, and now Edward's one of the only people, but because Nadia and him are the only ones who know the truth about this. At least Marianne's away, but got away with, and she's alive and back to her daughter. But Nadia's like, no, like we can't, like I know, like this guy's a monster. Like we can't just let him keep getting away with this. And so it's like, right, he's the obsessive person he is. So there's got to be tons of evidence back at his apartment. So at the same time, this is all happening, Joe finds out he's still alive. It's like, wait, what? And Kate's there. It's like, sadly, well, I mean, fortunately for Joe and maybe unfortunately for the world, things kind of work out. Things keep coming up. Hashtag Joe Groberg, coming up roses for him in some regards. And because he was, once again, especially this season where he's had, like, especially this back half, so much growth of self-realization about himself that it's just kind of like, it's like, I'm not going to lie to you, Kate. It wasn't an accident. I didn't fall in. I did it to myself. And she's like, oh yeah, my dad died. And it's like, yeah. And it's like, oh yeah, Reese's body was found. It's like, I know. It's like, okay, so no, there was some evidence found, but too badly it couldn't be found out whose DNA it was. Joe's almost like, wait, no, I didn't want you to cover up for me. She's like, it's too late, I already did. It's like, wow. She's like, I know you did that because my dad asked you to, but he was like, yeah, but it didn't take much of your dad persuading me. And it's just like, at the end of the day, for him, it's like, I'm a bad person. But for her, it's like, I have everything of my dad's now because of you. I've spent so much of my life thinking I'm a bad person, and you have gotten to the point that you kept convincing me so much that I'm a good person that now I'm actually starting to believe in myself for the first time in a long time. So, and she's like, I see deep in your soul that you are a good person too, no matter the bad that you've done. So let's kind of be good for each other. It's similar to the Love and Joe situation because they were meant to kind of keep each other in line, but the problem is Joe wasn't in love with Love anymore. He only stayed like that relationship was a byproduct of circumstance of like, only reason why I'm with you, I'm trying to make this work. The fact is I have to try to make it work instead of it just working. You know what I mean? Relationships take effort and stuff like that, but it's like, it shouldn't come that hard to love. So it's like a thing of like, no, he was only doing it for Henry's sake, and now it's like, so that's why that situation imploded in the way it did. But also, once again, it's Joe's thought that like, right, I do this to every woman, you know, no matter how perfect things are, it'll never be enough because it isn't just about the women, it's about something broken in him. Once again, back to Tom's world, the words that the world was fucked up already like this. He's like, I didn't make it like that, neither did you, Joe. It's just a byproduct of it. And, you know, we ourselves are byproducts of it. And Joe ends up even saying like, right, this world, it's messed up and it fucked me up in a lot of ways. But Kate is like, right, we can be those people for each other. We can be there to keep each other good, you know? And that, once again, that was supposed to be the thing between him and Love. But like, there was a detachment of, well, Love, Joe didn't love, but also he wasn't self-aware where he is now, where he's fully embraced his dark side, especially at the end, but we'll get to that in a second. He's fully embraced that. He recognizes who and what he is. So when it's all said and done, they're going to make this work. And she's like, I'm going to know about your past. And he's like, well, my name is Joe Goldberg. And Kate does just that. With all the power and resources she has, like, they do everything they can to basically spin Joe's story into like a harrowing story instead of being what it really is, you know? And then we have the Nadia stuff, her and Edward. I was like, oh God, like what's going to happen here? Like, especially because she's finding the evidence. I thought by the time she got to Joe's apartment, it'd all be gone and like it all meant nothing, right? But no, she found all the stuff about, Reese and everything, so it's like, cool, we got this. And the moment she's going out to go meet Edward, I was like, I'm nervous, and especially when he was in the car, I was like, oh God, he's not in the car. And Joe rolls up on her and be like, hey, Nadia, were you just coming out of my flat? It's like, no, I'm looking for Edward, he was at a mate's place. It's like, oh, what's the code to your phone? And just holds it up to her face and unlocks it. And he's like, okay, delete that. Just like, okay, I've come into a very good situation. I now have the resources to make us all happy. And I love what the show does. Because the show's done this before where they cut away from something and then they'll cut back to kind of fill you in about kind of like, know what actually ended up happening. So you're like, okay, so is Nadia going to take the deal? Because she's all about like, hey, she knows that Miriam is still alive, so obviously she's going to keep that hush-hush to protect her and her daughter, but it's like, yeah, I know what kind of monster you are, so is she going to just, like, take any money and leave? Well, it doesn't help that Edward's dead, and it's like, and, oh yeah, no, this was all part of the setup. Now it's like, cool, here, hold out your hand, and puts the knife in her hands, and now it looks like she did it, and making it seem like the one who ended up killing Reese and everything was, making it seem like it was Edward who ended up killing Reese. And it's like, oh, you found out and you had to stop him. Also, because, right, we don't have to worry about the eat the rich stuff because that has all fallen on Dawn's shoulder. So that's 100% on her. But, like, the evilness in which, like, Joe's kind of done, like, some evil stuff before. Because we kind of cut away from, like, the really, really evil stuff. Like, when he killed Beck, we never even saw that. That happened off screen. Obviously we were there when he ended up killing Love, and it's just, you know, he's very good at setting up a murder scene and stuff like that, or in that case, a murder scene / suicide scene. But now in this situation, he was like even more expertly, and just like now she's being framed for killing her boyfriend, who she was deeply falling for, because he was the only person she could trust. He's also the only other person that knows about Marianne still being alive, and now Nadia apparently hasn't said a word since she got locked up, because she didn't even defend herself to the police, and she hasn't spoken a word since going to prison. And it's like, see, I knew she was smart. And you're like, Jesus, Joe, the callousness in which you did this. But it's like, hey, I've got a new lease on life. This is my second chance. I'm not going to squander it. I'm going to do things the evil way, the right way, or the wrong way, I guess, in this regard. But yeah, Joe's able to spin everything, and we even see Marianne seeing it, and she's just like, right, second chance, at life or whatever. So that makes me almost go, so are we setting up Marianne to potentially play the role Candace did at the end of season 1 and in season 2, where she was about revealing Joe for what he was? To be fair, she probably doesn't want that, because it's like, right, I escaped. He thinks I'm dead. I'm going to let it stay that way. I get to live with my daughter and never have to cross paths with him again. Let the world deal with the monster that he is. But it's like, well, you're one of the only people around. You and Nadia are the only ones that know about the monster that he really, really is, and not this way that he's presented himself to the world. And, man, having that much power and reach by his side with Kate, he's able to kind of, once again, turn this whole thing around into a positive spin for his story of like what he's been through and what he's survived and stuff. It's like, yeah, my wife, she was troubled. We all know what it's like to be in like, violent relationships. And my wife loved, she was troubled. And so, and the fact is, once again, and then maybe that speaks so many volumes about who Kate is, that she is so accepting of all that Joe's done. And it's like, once again, it's like, oh, I've done bad, but we both kind of embrace the bad that we are, but recognize like we are good on the inside. I don't know if Kate's quite been like, oh, I'm bad and I fully accept it like the way Joe has. I don't know. It feels like Joe's kind of on his own on that island, but Kate has that potential in her because of her dad, and, her, being a lot more like her dad than she'd ever probably want to admit. Or she has been more admitting of like, yeah, I'm not a good person, but Joe kept being like, no, you are. And so she believes that, and she wants to keep hold of that, but she knows it's so easy to stray from that. So just once again, it's almost like a repeat of the Joe and Love thing in that regard, but I still think there's enough there to potentially keep that from being different, just because once again, Joe is more self-aware of who and what he is versus what he was then, being like, oh no, I'm a good guy. Those were mistakes. It's like, no, I'm a bad guy. I've killed people, but I can change the world. And what capacities, we have no idea how he'll fully go about changing the world. It's like, oh yeah, like Kate wants to change the world, and we even got updates on some of her friends. I don't think any of the groups, I don't think Beck's friends, I don't think Love's friends. Maybe we did with Beck and Love's friends. I don't quite remember the squad from season 2. Obviously, we got some heads up. We caught up with some of the neighbors from season 3 in the aftermath of everything. But her friends, was it Blessing and Sophie? Like, they ended up taking over that place after Adam died. And they've kind of benefited in certain regards. Like, Blessing ended up expanding stuff. Sophie's follower count went up like 50% after her brother died. Roland came back, but apparently he murdered one of his friends on a hunting trip, and his family covered it up. Poor Connie, he lasted 9 days in rehab, came out, back to his old ways, but hey, at least now he meditates too, so it works out. But at least the one person that's connected to all that it wound out working out for heavily was Phoebe. She left everything behind. She's teaching English in Thailand, and there her students don't know about her past. She gets to embrace being the good person that she is and was. She ended up leaving everything behind the moment she found out about Adam, because Kate went to tell her about Reese before she found out, but it turns out, like, I think she figured out, like, oh, your dad killed Adam, so it's just kind of leaving it all behind, which I'm sure for Kate it's like, no, I'm fine with that. At least she gets out and she's happy and she's okay. So that friend group is a lot smaller. So Kate is back stateside, so I don't know if they're planning to ever go back on the more London side of things in the aftermath of all of that, so. But at least, I mean, once again, we had those ruining people's lives. It's like, well, at the end of the day, I think Phoebe's life is the only life that got better in the aftermath of all of this. I mean, we know some of the couples, like, were in a better place, like, I can't remember their names. It's like the main couple that him and Love were like semi-tight with in season 3. Things kind of worked out for them in the end. Their relationship ended up becoming stronger after they were kind of stuck inside the box and everything, and one of them almost died and everything, right? So it doesn't always end badly for most people, but sometimes there are situations like a Phoebe or that couple where I feel like things worked out in the end. So like I said, it is this complicated thing. I mean, not only does Joe get away with everything and it gets covered up and gets to disappear, he's also got his name back. He's not, oh, I'll have to be Jonathan Moore anymore. I am Joe Goldberg. I mean, he literally did die and come back. He was dead for a little bit when he drowned, so once again, what good he's planning on doing, how he plans on changing the world, now with Kate by his side and everything, what that duo looks like. Once again, will it be a repeat of the love situation? Maybe not. Who knows? You ultimately have to, wait and see. It is March 21st at the time of me recording this. Netflix has not announced whether or not there will be a 5th season of the show. To be fair, it hasn't been a full 2 weeks yet, so usually it takes a little while for these decisions, but the show is, at least here in the States, I don't know what it's like internationally, but at least here in the States is in the top 10s, so I think it's in the 2nd spot, if I remember correctly. Maybe it's further up on the list. I want to say it's spot number 2 at the time of recording this, so I'd love to see what a season 5 would look like. I'm also interested because I think storyline-wise, we are past the books, because I know there's only 3 books in the story, because like season 2 and 3 kind of combines some of the, because I know Love wasn't as big of a character in the books from what the little bit research I've done, but obviously it's just because like Victoria, like I think, like I don't know whether it's just because just the creators of the show liked her so much, or just maybe like just fan wise people liked her a lot. I liked her as a Love a lot, so I'm glad she was like became a mainstay in like the twist with her character and stuff like that. So regardless, so I just don't, because I don't think I'm well versed enough in like what the events of the 3rd book are to know like whether like this kind of pulled anything from the books or anything, because this might have probably like diverted heavily. I don't know if this is kind of going down the Magician's route, which is a funny thing. I'd reference that show because Sarah Gamble was also like a producer and writer on that show as well. Yeah, because that it's a trilogy of books. But basically, that's the first 2 seasons of that show. The last 3 seasons, which is kind of its own thing to some extent. So I was wondering if you was kind of going down that route. Either way, tangents and all that aside, there are another plot threads that have been left open that could always circle back around. Like, for example, Joe. Well, everything with Joe's mom could like come back to the surface because of the position he's in. His story's out there even more publicly, especially because he's with someone powerful and rich like Kate too. So, but that also makes me wonder, because something I'd wondered too was this, kind of brought it up earlier this season, like, are we, like, because I was wondering like, oh, are we going to find out someone here is actually Joe's like half sibling? Because that's, we know his mom had at least one other child. I don't know if she had more than one or not. And Joe found out when he was fairly young about that, like, oh, you left me behind and you went off and started another family. So that's an element that could potentially come up in season 5, because it's something we learned about in season 3 that never got touched at all in this season. So once again, there's also the Marianne of it all, where she could come after Joe, but maybe she might not want to because she got away from him. Like, do you really want to kind of push yourself in that situation? Kind of like dusting up with Joe, even though he keeps getting away with it. So, and obviously he's going to be in a new stratosphere of like, oh, he was with the rich and powerful before. You're in a whole other class of rich and powerful now. So the type of like handshakes and devilish deals he makes, and also who he is now. He's not the same Joe that we've come to know over the course of this series. We're going to be dealing with an even darker Joe, in which you never thought, oh, that's possible. Once again, we were dealing with a Joe that was aloof, that didn't know himself. This is a Joe that knows who he is and what he's capable of. He's even saying like, yeah, I have other ways of dealing with things that don't involve murder. I mean, it's one of many options, but it's not a fit-all, solution. It's not a one-size-fit-all solution, but he does admit it's the easier option sometimes. So what that all means, I'd love to see what we get in the 5th season. I don't know if a 5th season would be like the 5th and final season of it all. Once again, a show being able to get a good 5 seasons, to me, that's the good bare minimum. So if they do renew it for one more season at the very least, I could definitely see it potentially being a final season. I don't know. Because it also depends on like how super successful the show is, how much the writers really want to keep going, and how much story they feel left to tell. I'm sure a lot of that plays like a contributing role, but I'm very excited to see what a potential season 5 could do. I mean, you could still end it off here because everything was closed enough for you to do that. But, you know, I personally would want at least one more season and see how this all ends. Would it be a situation of, nah, Joe, it will finally get what's his and he won't come out on top and he'll die. And sadly, probably won't be getting more Reese going. If there is another season, we probably won't get another, like, because him and Reese are whole now. Like, the most we got was that reflection at the end, but that's probably it. We'll never get, like, them two separate entities talking. It'd be interesting, but it's supposed to symbolize Joe being whole now. So Reese is no longer, they're one and the same. That's who he is now, but there's no, like, two separate entities anymore because Joe recognizes and embraces who and what he is, so. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.